This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, I am the Blood Guy and gonna do something a little bit different with this video. This is something more along the lines of something I've been wanting to do for quite a while, but didn't really know how to do it because instead of a film based on a real life serial killer, this is actually going to be a documentary on a real life serial killer. I've been wanting to do documentaries for a while, I've done one. I did review the Netflix Confession Killer on Henry Lee Lucas some time ago. I don't even remember how that came out. But I've always struggled with how to review documentaries because you're really just kind of relaying the information, and I don't really want to do that. So I think I figured out a way to just tell you what's in it kind of vaguely, just so you know what it covers. And I'm going to try it out with this one. So since this is kind of my first real attempt at a documentary, I figured this would be the perfect one. And this is one I found, I think, either on Thrift Books or I think I might have found it on Thrift Books, something like that, some used book site for less than $2. So I was really surprised because I've seen this go for like over $40 on other sites. But it's a film by John Borowski, who's done a number of pretty well done serial killer documentaries. Two other ones are on YouTube, so I'm going to check those out. But this is his 2004 documentary, H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer. Yeah, I found this. It was listed for like $1.90 something, so plus shipping, it was like less than $3. And surprisingly, it still came with the insert, which is just, you know, a reprint of Holmes's own drawing of the layout of his castle, which is the third floor, which was all just rented rooms in his bedroom, and the second floor, all the murder rooms. So for how cheap it was, I was surprised it came with that. But yeah, so H.H. Holmes, Dr. H.H. Holmes, widely considered to be America's first real serial killer. Obviously, he wasn't. I mean, there's a book I have here by Harold Schechter, who's actually in this. He's one of probably my favorite true crime writer. Everything he does is like the definitive work on whoever the subject is. And he did do a book on Holmes, which I have called Depraved. I do have a number of his books, but Psycho USA, the first half, like the first 270 pages, are all killers before or during Holmes's time of the late 1800s. I think he was just the first one to gain national attention. And he's one of those killers where we'll never really know the full story of him, which I'll get into, but he's kind of a mystery. He's very interesting. I would kind of compare him to Albert Fish in just the kind of criminal that he is. Because yes, he is a serial killer. Confirmed, sort of a lower body count, but he had a very prolific life as a con man, sort of a fraud. He was also a bigamist, but he was also a doctor. And he's known for his murder castle, where it's essentially like a fun house where the rooms kill you. You know, there were gas rooms, there were doors where you open them, and it's just a brick wall, very labyrinthine corridors that would go nowhere while these people are being gassed. And just a very interesting, but almost the kind of killer that you would see in a movie, like almost couldn't be real. And it was, most of his kills were during the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. That's where people think he may have killed up to 200 people because of the setup that he had, which I'll get into all that. But this is a pretty interesting film. It's not the most comprehensive or most in-depth thing I've seen or heard on Holmes, but it's still very interesting. And the way it's done is, I really like the way it was done as well. So, yeah, it was written, directed, and produced by John Borowski, which the ones that are on YouTube, there is Carl Panzram. I can't remember the whole title of it. I think it's called like A Legacy of Hate or something like that. And then there's Albert Fish. In Sin, He Found Salvation or something like that. But he has a bunch of other ones. Those are the ones you can also get on a DVD. But he does. Uh, in Sin, He Found Salvation. That's the name of the Albert Fish one. That one's on YouTube. Carl Panzram, The Spirit of Hatred and Vengeance. But and then other ones that you can watch on streaming, like the John Wayne Gacy murders, Life and Death in Chicago, which there's also a book of. He also did several books. I know there's the Ed Gein book, there's a Gacy book, there's quite a few books, and of course I would like to get all of them. I thought that was going to be a list of them. But this is narrated by Tony Jay, who people might recognize as the voice of Claude Frollo in the 96 animated Hunchback of Notre Dame. He also narrated the Albert Fish one, and his voice is perfect for something like this. It's not your typical documentary where you have a bunch of people either that, well, obviously that worked the case. This was over 100 years ago, where you have all these different experts or whoever talking. There's only like 3 people that we actually see sitting there talking to the screen, one of which is Harold Schechter. I always love when he comes up. Again, he's my favorite true crime writer. Which also, I also have the book, The Devil in the White City. This is the book that usually gets mentioned when people talk about Holmes. I always thought this was more of the definitive work. And yes, DiCaprio and Scorsese have been trying to get this made since 2015. Apparently now it's slated for a Hulu release in 2024 with DiCaprio playing Holmes. I guess Keanu Reeves is supposed to be in it as someone. I'll be interested to see that whenever it comes out. But so Harold Schechter, he's one of the people that talks to the screen, along with I can't remember. They're not listed under starring because there are actors in this, which as you can see here, like when it goes black and white with sort of the pulsating lighting, the vignetted, shadowed out corners. Those are actors doing like a dramatization of Holmes's crimes. But it's made to look like a silent film. There's no audio, there's no dialogue, there's some screams. Made to look like an old 20s or 30s horror film. And it's pretty well done. It has a very good aesthetic. It actually reminded me of the, I think it's a 1932 Vampire. We're spelled with the Y. I have reviewed it. I think it's 32. Very good film. That's kind of what the way it's filmed. That's kind of what it reminded me of. But it also has like a lot of pictures and like drawings of Holmes or Chicago, the castle, people and places of that time. It'll also have graphics like this, almost kind of like a moving comic, where you'll have like a picture, like a building and a person, and then like an animated background, and they'll move. So it's pretty interesting how it's done. And of course, narrated by Tony Jay, Claude Frollo, perfect voice. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's there's a 20-minute making of, which I forgot was on there. I probably should have watched it. Trying to get the 64 minutes, and this is the unrated director's cut, but yeah, an hour 4 minutes, so it's not going to be the most comprehensive thing that you'll see, but it definitely keeps your attention. It kind of goes through the broad strokes of Holmes's life, which when I go through what's in this film, I'm going to be as vague as possible because I do want people to see this. You might find this on YouTube. I know his Fish and Panzram documentaries are on there. But yeah, I never got bored with it. Obviously, it doesn't go really in depth with all of his cons or all of his scams or all of his victims because we don't know how many victims he's had. But it stays interesting with its dramatizations, black and white dramatizations, the pictures and drawings, sort of like the not political, but like the newspaper sketches from that time, or like this moving graphic comic kind of animation. But yeah, alongside Harold Schechter, there's a criminal profiler that talks, and then there's a woman who works in forensics that kind of compares forensics of the 1890s and now. Excuse me. And this doesn't just cover his crimes. I mean, we go all the way back to his birth, what he was like as a kid, how he got to Chicago, how he got into crime, goes into his marriages and his long list of mistresses, his business partner, Benjamin Peitzel. It's fairly in depth for a lot of the basic stuff, but it doesn't go fully in depth to all the people he's suspected of killing. Because he was convicted of one. They can link him to 9, but he confessed to 27. Some of those people were still alive. So it doesn't go into every single person. So it's not very in-depth, but it's still well done. If you're into serial killers at all, this would definitely be one to check out. And I've seen bits and pieces of the Albert Fish one. That'll be the one that I watch next. I will be watching that and the Panzram one. But yeah, still a decent documentary. Definitely worth checking out. Only an hour, 4 minutes. It does have some creepy music. It kind of does feel like a horror film. With the way the dramatizations are shot. Which, it really does feel like a 30s film. The lighting, just the way it's shot, the way the actors are, they're overacting like they did in the 30s. And, people like Schechter or the profiler, they're full of information. And Tony Jay's narration is both creepy, foreboding, but managed to keep it interesting. I pretty much just knew the broad strokes. I have read this one. I've been meaning to read this one. I haven't read this one yet, but I have read this. And of course, the encyclopedias and the other documentaries I've held up in every video. So, there wasn't a whole lot I really learned. There were some things. But, yeah, this would be a great introduction to Holmes if you don't know that much about him. That's probably the best thing I could say about it, other than how well made it is that this would be a good introduction. John Borowski definitely has, I can already tell just from this one documentary, he definitely has a style. And I'm very excited to see what he does with Fish and Panzram. So I'm still going to do the summary, sort of the cliff notes of The Killer, and then I'm just going to quickly go through the topics it covers with as little detail as possible. So let's get into that. So yeah, I will try to be vague on the stuff that the film covers, but I still want to give a summary about Holmes, just for the people that don't know. So Dr. H.H. Holmes, who was born Herman Webster Mudgett, has long been considered America's first serial killer, or at least the first notorious one. Though he was only convicted of the murder of one person, that being his business partner Benjamin Peitzel, authorities believed he had killed 9, including 4 children, and he confessed to 27 murders between 1891 and 1894. In the century since, it is believed he may have killed up to 200, luring them to his murder castle, a triple-decker building during the 1893 Chicago's World Fair. This murder castle consisted of the first floor, which was a pharmacy, a restaurant, and a blacksmith shop, the third floor, which was rented rooms and Holmes's own bedroom, and then the second floor, which had 35 rooms, mostly for killing, and these murder rooms often had eye holes in the walls so he could watch his victims die. These consisted of gas rooms, labyrinthian corridors, and doors that would open to brick walls, and a chute that went to the basement for body disposal, consisting of acid vats, lye pits, and a crematorium. After cleaning the skeletons, he would sell them to medical schools, and that's how he was able to get rid of the bodies and get away with the crime. Some of his victims were said to be his own mistresses due to botched abortions, or maybe they weren't botched at all. But the mortality rate of abortions back then were very high. Apart from his murders, he led a life of crime since the late 1880s. As a prolific conman, scam artist, fraud, and bigamist, he was apprehended in Boston on November 17, 1894, when he failed to pay another convict, Marion Hedgepeth, for helping him get out of jail earlier that year. Upon searching his castle and looking into some of his life insurance scams, he was put on trial and convicted of one murder. He was hanged on May 7th, 1896, 9 days before his 35th birthday. For over 100 years after his death, we only know so much about Holmes and his crimes, including his victims and how they died. This is due to poor forensic science, sensational and hyperbolic tabloids, and Holmes' own exaggerated and false accounts, including some of the 27 confessions being people that were still alive. We'll probably never know the fullest, truest extent of H.H. Holmes' life and crimes. And so now I'm just going to, as quickly as possible, just say kind of what topics it covers, because I do want people to see this. Yeah, it is kind of pricey on some websites, but if you go to like Thrift Books or Olibris, I think is how you pronounce it, which that might have been where I bought it, you can find it for like less. Like, I found this for like $1.90 something, so definitely worth picking up. But real quick, the film, it also has voiceover acting for Holmes or his numerous wives and mistresses or the judge on his trial. And the voiceover acting kind of has this creepy, old school radio drama type feel. The voiceover acting is actually better than some documentaries like this, which Holmes is also in. Excuse me. But it consists of excerpts from his own journal, which he called Holmes' Own Story, which he wrote in Moyamensing prison while awaiting his hanging on May 7th of 1896. It starts with his birth in Gilmanton, New Hampshire as Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861, some of his family history, his early school career, when he attended the University of Michigan between 1882 and 84, chemistry and anatomy, how he changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes, and moved to Chicago in 1886, a little bit of Chicago history and where they were at that time, how he started becoming a scam artist and a con man, such as like with the drugstore he owned or this elixir that he had. Talked about how he started planning and drawing and building his castle and how the castle was built. Mentions how it was running concurrently with Jack the Ripper. Goes into the layout of the castle, how he sold cleaned skeletons to medical schools, his meeting and business teaming with an alcoholic named Benjamin Peitzel. More into how he runs his castle, his bigamous marriages, illegal abortions, and his other scams. it does go fairly into depth to his number of mistresses, aside from his fraudulent marriages. Mentions various supposed victims throughout, like some of his mistresses and other people. Uh, Obviously, there's other ones that were rumored and other ones that are suspected, but it does talk about a few. It goes into the downfall and the end of Holmes and Peitzel's partnership, his first arrest in July of 1894, and how he got out of it, the differences and advancements in forensics, and using the murder of Benjamin Peitzel to state the limitations of where they were with forensics compared to today. What led to Holmes's arrest in Boston on November 17th, 1894, the search for the Peitzel children, and the search of his castle, the aftermath of his capture, and the aftermath with the castle, what happened to the castle, his trial, the time between his conviction, execution, and his confessions in between, Holmes's hanging and the aftermath of his death, and ends with probably the most famous Holmes quote of all time, the "I was born with the devil in me" quote, but it has the whole thing. So it goes over all that in 64 minutes, and it does it pretty well. It goes nice and smoothly. It does have a nice flow to it. It doesn't feel scattered or like it's jumping around a lot. The style or the stylization of some things, like I would actually say the dramatization is actually pretty good. It's not like corny after school special video dramatization acting, like say some of the acting in this, or like a lot of serial killer documentaries. It's pretty moody and atmospheric, and that along with Tony Jay's voice, it does, create kind of a mood. And I would say Tony Jay's voice is one of the best parts about it. And, just being a huge fan of, like, Harold Schechter, who actually wrote both of these books, and I do have a number of other ones by him. I love just listening to that guy talk about his knowledge of serial killers. He's in every documentary of Ed Gein. The bulk of it is told through narration and voiceover acting, which is kind of interesting. But, you do get a couple just very specific experts like Harold Schechter, the profiler, and the forensics expert. But I like how it goes from, the black and white, old silent film dramatization to actual photos, drawings, newspaper articles, that sort of graphic novel kind of animation. So it's a very solid documentary. Again, probably not the most comprehensive or in-depth thing that you'll find on Holmes, but it would be a good introduction. I would say these two definitely, but I know a lot of people consider this to be the definitive work, so this would be a great place to start. And I thought it was well made, and I'm pretty excited to check out Borowski's other works, like the one on Fish, Panzram, if I can find a way to watch his Gacy one. But yeah, I'll be doing Fish and Panzram next, so you can check those out when I do those. And feel free to let me know if this format of talking about documentaries works. This is just something I'm trying out. I didn't really want to talk about, which I know I gave that long summary about Holmes, but I figured just giving the vague, answerless topics instead of actually saying what it says was probably a better way to do it, because I don't just want to relay the information, because I think that's what I did on the Confession Killer review, and that's actually why I put off documentaries for so long. I didn't really know how to review them. But so let me know if this formula kind of works, and then I'll try it out for other documentaries, because I do have a lot of other ones outside of John Borowski. But anyway, that is his first serial killer documentary, and on the first American serial killer. So stay tuned for more documentaries and films based on real-life serial killers, and thank you for watching.